ToolCASE, the retail banking industry's preferred choice for real-time risk management and fraud detection.
This is your host, Sam Piccolotti at ToolCASE. ToolCASE is a leading provider of real-time analytics, artificial intelligence solutions that have been empowering financial institutions to combat fraud and reduce their risk exposure since 1999. And you can learn more about ToolCASE at www.toolcase.com. Today's co-host on our FraudCAST is Brett Johnson. If you knew Brett years ago, you were probably on one side or the other of the criminal system. Brett Johnson was responsible for refining modern financial cybercrime as we know it today. After being placed on the United States Most Wanted list, captured and convicted of 39 felonies, Brett promptly escaped prison. Captured again, Brett served his time, accepted responsibility, and found redemption through his loved ones and the help of the FBI. Today, he's considered a leading authority on internet crime, identity theft, and cybersecurity. And Brett speaks and consults across the planet to help protect people and organizations from the type of person he used to be. Once cited or known by the Secret Service as the original Internet Godfather, Brett Johnson built and ran the first organized cybercrime community called Shadow Crew. How you doing, buddy?
Sam, I'm doing good. I don't know what to think about that introduction, though.
We had the opportunity to meet years ago at an ISMG conference, and I think it was New York City. And I saw you speak there, and certainly an interesting background. And the guests may not know, but we had the pleasure of also having you attend one of our ToolCASE conferences in Vail, Colorado a few years ago. You were part of the panel and a discussion there. And so I know your backstory. We gave a little bit of the bio there, but I think it'd be helpful for the listeners to hear a little bit more. I know we dropped a little bit of a taste as to what your background was, but why don't you go ahead and share for the folks? We'll get that out of the way, and then we'll start talking fraud.
Sure. Well, what is there to say? The United States Secret Service, of course, they called me the original Internet Godfather. The way I got the title, and you alluded to that, 39 felonies, being placed on the United States Most Wanted list. I had an escape from prison, and I built the first organized cybercrime community. It was called Shadow Crew. It was a precursor to today's darknet and darknet markets, laid the foundation for the way modern cybercrime channels operate today. Now, what do I mean by that? What I actually mean by that is I helped to establish a trust mechanism that criminals could use, because before Shadow Crew, there's actually three sites. There's Shadow Crew, Carter Planet, and Counterfeit Library. I ran Counterfeit Library and Shadow Crew. A guy named Dmitry Golubov, Ukrainian dissident, he ran Carter Planet. If you were looking to engage in crime before these three sites, specifically Counterfeit Library and Shadow Crew, if you were looking to engage in cybercrime before that, the only avenue you really had was an IRC chat session, this rolling chat board who you had no idea who you were talking to, if you could trust them, if they were a cop or a criminal, if they had a product or service that you like, credit cards or data that you were trying to buy, if they actually had the data, or if they were just trying to rip you off, because let's be honest, everyone there was a criminal. So what Shadow Crew did is it provided a trust mechanism for criminals to use. So now you had a large communication channel in the form of a forum type structure where people that were in different time zones could reference conversations days, weeks, months old. You could take part in those conversations, learn from those conversations, ask questions, learn from other people. You knew by looking at someone's screen name what the skill level of that person was. If you could network with them, if you could learn from them, if you could trust them. We had vouching systems in place, escrow systems in place, all with the idea of being able to work with another criminal who you had no idea what their real name was. You would never find out. You would never meet them in person. And if you think about it, I mean, that's a big problem to solve. And it sounds like I'm proud of that. I'm not, but it's a big problem to solve in how do you engage in criminal activity with someone unless you can trust them? And how do you trust them if you don't know who they are? So you have to have these mechanisms in place so you can do that. And that's what Shadow Crew, when I ran it, provided, and that's what we built was that, and that's why I'm called the original Internet Godfather. The 39 felonies, well, that had to do with refining modern financial cybercrime. If you look at credit card theft, account takeovers, even the forerunners of synthetic fraud, tax return identity theft, stolen identities, all that begins with this idiot that's talking to you today, Brett Johnson. Of course, I went to prison, deservedly so, and served. I was sentenced to 7.5 years, and I deserved every single day of it, every single day. I was very fortunate I was able to turn my life around. Very fortunate. I had the help of my wife. I had the help of the FBI and the help of my sister that really got me turned around on things. And today I live a very blessed life that I don't deserve, but I am damn sure grateful for. And you guys over at ToolCASE, I mean, you work with ToolCASE, you guys do a great job. You do. And it's not just because I got to enjoy Vail, Colorado with you guys, which is a beautiful place, but you guys do a fantastic job. And it is my complete honor to be on the show with you today.
Well, it's mutual. And, folks, there's a deeper story. And I invite you all to go check out Brett's website. You can find him at anglerfish.com. That's angler and fish with a P, and get more on Brett there. Brett, let's get the folks caught up today on kind of the backstory of fraud. I think, there's so much going on. The world has gone almost completely digital in a very short period of time. What we just went through in 2020, pushed really the limits of financial institutions, especially to build out their digital enterprises, and the fraudsters, just took full advantage of that, sitting and looming. But what I don't think people understand is maybe the dark side or the insider's perspective of how the fraud enterprise system really works. Do you mind sharing and talking about that?
Yeah, let's and just to elaborate a little bit more on that. When I say that the Secret Service called me the original Internet Godfather, cybercrime before the sites that I built and ran came into being, cybercrime just really wasn't around. All right. And after that is when everything kind of pops up. So, we ended, Shadow Creek makes the front cover of Forbes, August 2004, headline, Who's Stealing Your Identity? October 26, 2004, United States Secret Service arrested 33 people, 6 countries, 6 hours. I was the only guy who got away. They picked me up a few months later, Secret Service did, and they gave me a job, and I'm the idiot that decided to keep breaking the law from inside Secret Service offices for the next year until they find out about it. Then I take off on a cross-country crime spree, steal $600,000 in 4 months, wake up one morning, I'm on the United States Most Wanted list. I was in Las Vegas, Nevada at that point, and I literally did this, Seb. I looked at the screen. I was reading the blurb where I'd made the U.S. Most Wanted list. Looked at myself and I said, "Whoa, Mr. Johnson, you've made the U.S. Most Wanted list. What now?" And I said out loud, "I'm going to Disney World." So that's exactly what I did. Yeah, went to Disney World like an idiot and lasted about 6 weeks. That's when the Secret Service came and got me, arrested me, sent me to prison. Then, of course, I escaped from prison after that. I just want people to understand that, first of all, when you're on the Most Wanted list, you are not a good guy. You've got to do some really bad stuff to be considered the most wanted guy in the United States. So you're not a good guy. And I certainly was not a good guy back then. I like to think I'm a better person now. What we need to discuss is, you ask, how does cybercrime operate? And we're talking financial cybercrime, but it really crosses the verticals of all different types of cybercrime, what I'm going to talk about today. There are 3 necessities to successful cybercrime. Those 3 necessities are gathering data, committing crime, and then cashing out. Now, what do I mean by that? So gathering data, that is stealing or buying PII or stolen credit card information, bank account logins, credit card logins, whatever the information is you need to then commit the crime. But it's also, gathering data also encompasses the tools that any criminal may need to help commit that crime. So it's proxies, because sometimes the criminal is in Uganda or maybe in California, and he wants to appear that he's in Florida or New York. So it's proxy addresses that allows him to spoof the computer's address. It's spoof phone call numbers. So instead of you seeing the phone number that he's calling from, you see the phone number of the Social Security Administration or your local sheriff's office or something like that. So it's the tools that are being used as well. Okay, maybe it's a burner phone, whatever that is, whatever.
Sure, and even in the world of social media today, it's accounts or profiles that aren't
Absolutely
legitimate.
It's whatever he needs to help do the second necessity of cybercrime. That's committing the crime. Okay, and then finally, cashing out. So gathering data, committing the crime, and then cashing out, putting literal cash in pocket. Now, that seems like that's kind of an easy thing, putting cash in pocket. Okay, but it's really not. If you think about it, it's really not, because I can engage in BEC, business email compromise. I can easily, and it's not difficult, I can easily have some payroll department wire $2 to $3 million into a bank account that I've set up. That does not mean that I've profited $2 to $3 million. Until I'm able to put the cash in pocket, I've not stolen anything. All right, so that becomes a big, big issue for criminals. And we see that this year with the stimulus fraud that's been going on. Okay, and there's a real reason that criminals tend to target unemployment fraud over Paycheck Protection Program fraud or SBA loans or anything else like that. And it boils down to that laundering mechanism. How do you cash out massive amounts of money? It becomes very difficult to do that. All right, so 3 necessities: gathering data, committing crime, cashing out. All 3 necessities have to work in conjunction. If they don't, the crime fails. Now the problem, and here's the problem with all of this stuff. The problem is that one criminal, he is not good in all 3 things. He's good in one thing. Sometimes he's good in 2. Very rarely can he do 3. And that, my friend, is why you see the forums, the dark web marketplaces, the groups, everything else. That's why they exist. They allow that one criminal who's good in one of those necessities to network with other criminals who are good in necessities where he or sometimes she is not. Take, for example, the marketplaces. That's where you go and buy stolen credit card details or bank account logins, all these other things. Now, those are.
And I think, let me interrupt you there. I think the key to that reference is marketplace. And what
Absolutely.
people need to understand is that, this is where things are getting traded, whether it's data or it's tutorials on how to commit fraud. But the bad actors have a marketplace.
Absolutely. And the marketplace, to give you an idea on how big cybercrime is. Okay, Shadow Crew is shut down October 26, 2004. We ended with 4,000 members. Fast forward to 2017. 2017, a dark web website called Alpha Bay, which was the largest criminal marketplace on the planet at that point in time, is shut down by the federal government, actually by the World Interpol system. It ends with 240,000 criminals on there. Okay, 240,000. Now, 2019, another website is shut down by law enforcement. 1.15 million members on there. So these numbers continue to increase. You continue to see more and more people deciding to make cybercrime their career. And the reason for that is the entry to cybercrime, the entry to engaging in these crimes is extremely easy. You don't really need to know how to do anything because you've got these information providers, that first necessity of cybercrime. You've got the people who provide the data. You don't have to worry about how to steal data. Someone does it for you. That's their expertise. They don't know how to commit the crime. They don't know how to cash it out. But by God, they know how to steal the data and resell it. So you've got that necessity of cybercrime taken care of. Okay? That's the way this thing works. So then the people who are looking to commit the crime, they say, well, I want to commit some credit card theft today. How do I do that? Well, let's go over here to Black Market or White House Market and see what they've got. They find a credit card provider, start buying credit card details or bank account logins. Or maybe they don't want that. Maybe they're trying to figure out how to set up fraudulent bank accounts. So they can buy a tutorial that walks them through step by step how to set up a bank account with any bank that you want to set up with. Matter of fact, the other day I bought a a tutorial from White House Market that walked you through. It was weird. It was literally step by step what each screen showed and everything else for the Naval Credit Union. All right. And it was a tutorial on how to set up an account right there, what you needed to click on, how much you needed to say you made, everything else in order to gain access to their federal credit union and set up an account there. That is not uncommon that happens. Matter of fact, there was a bank 4 or 5 years ago that a tutorial was being sold, and the tutorial mentioned the actual name of the customer service agent that you wanted to speak to when you called in to set up an account. You wanted to ask for this guy because he will be the easy one to get past right there. So,
got the personal extension of their favorite inside actor.
And that's one of the things that people don't understand. The exchange of information on the criminal side far exceeds the collaboration on the good guy side. It far exceeds that. And the good guys have got regulations, they've got privacy concerns. Criminal doesn't give a damn about HIPAA, GDPR, or anything else like that. Doesn't care. So we understood with Shadow Crew that if we educated everyone across the board, if we were open source with information, that everyone at the end of the day becomes more knowledgeable, the group becomes better, and you end up profiting more. You steal more money at the end of the day. And that same mindset exists today among criminal groups. You see this almost free exchange of information across the board. So if you're on the dark web, you'll have someplace like Dread, which is the dark web, which is the Reddit of the dark web. You'll see that free exchange of information. You'll see someone that will ask a question. They'll say, how do I commit Paycheck Protection Program fraud, PPP fraud? And they'll either have the answer already there on that forum, or somebody will say, this is how you do it, or instant message me. We'll talk about it offline. And they'll walk them through it. This is what you need to do. This is what you need to do. This is the bank you need to go through. This is how you cash this stuff out, everything else like that. Okay. So
you just hit on that PPP fraud. And if you think about that and how, we're less than a year into that. And already the exploitation of those dollars is, I'm sure it's got to be close to the billions now. And that's something that was developed and was mastered and delivered to the marketplace in just a matter of months.
Oh yeah, yeah. So and here's the interesting thing about COVID and stimulus programs and things like that. Before last March came around, criminals had a sense of desperation about them. All right. There was always desperation on the criminal side of things. And I used to have this rule. I used to teach things on Shadow Crew all the time of never act in desperation, because desperation leads to poor choices. Well, what happens with the pandemic and stimulus programs and everything else is all of a sudden, criminals are no longer desperate. Now criminals are calm, cool, collected, and calculating. The desperation now is on the good guy side of things. And let me walk you through what I mean by that. So criminals were desperate with all three necessities of cybercrime. So with gathering data, they needed to sell it or use it before the breach was discovered, before someone put a freeze on their credit or whatever was going on. So there was an element of desperation there. There was an element of desperation when it came to committing the crime. You wanted to make sure you were able to commit the crime and not get caught. So there's an element of desperation there. And then there was an element of desperation when it came to cashing out. Can I get the money out of the account before the account is frozen or flagged as fraud? All right. That was the desperation throughout the criminal side. And it was always a worry, a concern. But what happened? What happened is COVID-19. COVID-19 basically shut the United States economy down in about 6 weeks. So desperation ran rampant on the good guy side of things. The United States government, they said to themselves, hey, we've got to do something. If we don't get some money out in the economy and help these businesses and help these people, our economy is going to go bottom up. So we've got to do something. So they instituted these programs without any security in place whatsoever. And I mean any security. Initially, to commit fraud with any of those programs, the only thing you needed was stolen PII, someone's social security number, date of birth. You put an address to it, you put a phone number to it, register, and you're making money all of a sudden. That's what happened. And it wasn't just the government that was desperate, retail merchants. So retail merchants, they estimated that they were going to lose 12.3% of business. It came in at 16.7%. 16.7% loss. You had 38 million Americans out of work. 38 million Americans worried about how they're going to pay the bills, if they're going to lose their house, how they're going to put food on the table, where they're going to get a job. You had all these people that were desperate all of a sudden. And what happens when desperation's there? You make poor choices.
Interesting paradigm shift. Yeah, no doubt.
So that's what happened is that. So all of a sudden you had all these criminals, the guys that were committing credit card fraud or what have you, they look, and it was because of the Nigerians. So these stories started to come out of Washington State about these Nigerians that were hitting the the state unemployment benefit system. Mm-hmm. They ended up stealing $1 billion. Now, they didn't profit $1 billion, but they damn sure had $1 billion transferred out to bank accounts. This comes into that third necessity of cybercrime, cashing out, putting cash in pocket that I've been talking about. All right. So the Nigerians, they had all the data in the world. Like I said, you only needed PII. You only needed social security numbers and dates of birth. That's all you needed. Well, you could buy that all day long for $2, $3, $4 a piece if you've not already got it free. All right, so they had all the data. They knew how to commit the crime because it was pretty easy. You just register and have an instrument for deposit. It's going to hit. What they didn't anticipate was how successful that crime was going to be. So all of a sudden, the Nigerians start, they scale it up where they're filing hundreds and thousands of claims a day. They end up having $1 billion sent out. Then what do they find? We can't get the money out in time. They ended up profiting about $300 million. That's what they were able to get out of accounts before the federal government and law enforcement had that money recalled. That gives you an idea, and that's a lot. That's a big payday. It's not $1 billion payday, though. But that's the problem that you see across the board with cybercrime is how do you cash out massive amounts of money? And that is why unemployment fraud is the most important type of fraud for criminals to engage in right now, because you go down, you get a prepaid debit card and have up to $10,000 deposited on that pretty quick. All right. So you don't have to worry about setting up bank accounts or anything else. You use a prepaid account that accepts $10,000. And back when the stimulus was really hitting, the deposits were right at $10,000. So you could commit it one time, or you could scale it up beautifully and commit 1,000 returns a week, 1,000 files a week, get 1,000 cards, have a bunch of money mules cash them out, good to go. All right. Whereas if you're doing paycheck protection program fraud, sure, you can get $2 million, and that's what the limit was. As long as the government told people what to do to commit fraud. They said, hey, keep it under $2 million. It's all self-certified. We're not going to audit you. Oh, my God. Really? So they told them what they needed to do to commit fraud and not get caught. But the problem is yes, you can commit that fraud and have $2 million sent to an account. How in the hell are you going to get $2 million out of a new account? You're not. If I were to go down to Chase or any bank in town and set up a brand new bank account, and a week later have $2 million deposited into that account, and then walk in the next morning or call them the next morning and say, oh yeah, say, can you wire that $2 million over to Coinbase for me? They're not going to do that. They're going to say, you know what? We need to sit on that for about 30 days, make sure everything's all right. And then that 30 days point is when law enforcement notifies the bank, no, we need that money back. All right. So it becomes a huge issue on getting money out of accounts on time. That's why when you look at the news stories, all these people that were caught committing PPP fraud, they use their own bank accounts to have the money wired to, because that's what you got to do. You got to have an aged account. You got to have an account that's had traffic through it, all this other stuff. So all these guys, they figured that out as they're committing the fraud. They're like, oh, I got to have the money deposited in my own account. Well, that's all right. I won't get caught.
Well, let's, because you hit upon a couple really interesting points. One is that the sense of urgency or desperation has really worked to the deficit of the good guys in recent cases, especially with the COVID situation. The other piece that I want to mention and maybe even dive into is data and the access to PPI and that kind of thing. I think what people and maybe even financial institutions fail to consider or recognize is that, look, we've all seen the breaches. We've had a myriad of them. I think in 2019 it was over 60 billion records, whatever the number was, but it's happening on a day-to-day basis. What I think people forget, because those lawsuits are settled and the fines are instituted, and banks and other institutions who've had those compromises pay out when they're victims of breach, if you will. But that data doesn't go away. It continues to exist and trade within that marketplace that you've clearly defined. And so getting that PPI is as easy as can be. And so, we run analytics, and we do a tremendous job and have sophisticated intelligence to be able to query and analyze data. But so do the bad guys, right?
Absolutely.
So those data sets are sitting out there. They can still query that information or correlate that information and gain the PPI that they need for those attacks.
Right.
I think
and understand, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but understand that one of the big things that a lot of people don't understand is that on the bad guy side of things, information is real time. All right? It's real time.
That's where I was going. Yeah.
It's not 48, 2 weeks late. It's real time. Hey, Ohio is shut down right now. Don't commit fraud in Ohio's unemployments. Where are we going to switch to? We're going to switch to Kentucky right now. Everybody's hitting Kentucky's. It's real time. So you have to have, and ToolCASE does this, right? I mean, you have to have real time data on the good guy side. If you don't, guess what? Criminals love that gap. They walk right into that gap where you're not well informed in real time, and they're eating you alive during that gap. So you have to have real time data.
The real time data, and you mentioned the PPP loans and how people are using their own accounts. And the other aspect of that is, having some type of artificial intelligence or historical analysis that can look back at records of these individuals, first identify maybe they're not even a business owner and they're collecting that money, right?
I mean, yeah.
Or they've not had a deposit of $8,000 in the past. So to be able to correlate that information quickly when those funds hit those accounts, because they're using their own personal accounts, when those funds hit those accounts, to be able to analyze that information, as you mentioned, in real time with the intelligence, say, this is unusual. This is not typical of this particular customer or member in the case of a credit union. But those analytics often wane and are challenged. To put all three of those things together takes a lot of effort and pretty sophisticated solutions. And I think the FI industry is still working to catch up on those pieces.
I mean, you're right. They are. I mean, typically what happens, and it happened, it's like stimulus fraud's a poster child for explaining this stuff. But typically what happens is a system, a merchant, government, whatever, is hit with fraud. So they come in, they say, well, we've got to do something. What can we do? And they tend to implement security piecemeal. Well, we'll try this. We just need to try this. This is where they're hitting. We'll try this. That's the wrong thing to do. I talk about this all the time. The bad guys have a toolbox, and in their toolbox, they have a variety of tools with which to attack you. They have the low-level tools, the social engineering, the spoof phone calls, all that crap. They've got the high-level SQL Server attacks, everything else like that. You, as a defender, whether a person or a company, you need a toolbox too with a variety of tools in there. You got to have it. You got to have it. But the most important tool in there, the most important tool that you're ever going to see is that data tool. And again, unemployment fraud illustrates that. Now, credit card fraud illustrates that as well. When people are first trying to start stopping credit card fraud. And the same thing happens with unemployment fraud. So what happens? Unemployment systems are eaten alive. Every state loses billions of dollars. All right, billions of dollars that could be used to help the citizens of that state. Billions of dollars that will never be returned, or they'll never get that back, even if they catch the guys, and they're not going to catch the guys. Even if they catch the guys that committed the crime, the guys have already spent the money. They bought the damn Rolex or the Lamborghini or whatever they're buying with it. That money's gone. The good that money could have done is gone. So the states get eaten alive. They say, we need to do something. So what do? The first thing they do is they say, well, we'll ask KBA, knowledge-based authentication questions. Are you kidding me? The security questions that you have to open up an account or change existing information? Well, guess what? Criminals have had that data for decades. For decades. You said it yourself. This data never changes. Never changes. You know, your Social Security is never going to change. Your mother's maiden's never going to change. Nothing like that. Well, those questions were easy to answer. So that didn't stop any of the fraud. So then what do? Well, tell you what we'll do. Why don't we require them to send in photos or scans of identity documents, proof of address, and maybe a bank statement? That'll fix them. Well, guess what? Criminals have been doing that for decades too. You could buy a package of these Photoshop or scanned documents for anywhere from $25 to $50. So that didn't stop anything. So that was the next step. Then they kept going step by step. They got to identity verification. Then they went through a few steps of that as well. Now, finally, a few of these states, nowhere near all of them, a few of these states have started to say, you know, come to think of it, maybe we should be looking at a lot of the data that's surrounding these files too, like the velocity, the deposit instruments, the IP ranges, the device information. Maybe we need to be looking at a lot of that. When the truth of the matter is they should have been looking at all of that to begin with. You come in with a variety of tools, data being the most important, because without data, you're flying blind. You are completely flying blind. You come in with a variety of tools, and you stop the fraud. You come with so many different tools that the criminals all of a sudden are like, what the hell? Yeah. Where do we even start? But they don't do that. They do piecemeal, and piecemeal's easy enough to do.
No, it's hard to train a holistic mentality when it comes to trying to mitigate fraud, across an enterprise. We're fortunate in that, we read the data that you're talking about, read the data in real time. We have the integration of capabilities to bring in, multiple data sets, look at the IP information, whatever data might be available, analyze that, apply a certain level of intelligence in real time, and deliver a solution. But
absolutely.
But that's a limited approach across the industry. I think you hit on a couple topics. We've got more to discuss in the future. PPP loan fraud, really very problematic across the United States right now. I know financial institutions combating on a regular basis. People don't realize there's that's money that is backed through the SBA. So banks are still taking a hit. Federal government, somebody's got to pay for this stuff.
Yeah,
and everybody's going to pay for it. The cost of fraud trickles right back down to the consumer, back to you and I. It's a big problem. Brett Johnson, good to chat. We've got more to talk about in the future on FraudCAST sessions. Look forward to more of them.
Sam, thank you. I appreciate it.
Talk soon.
Learn more about the ToolCASE suite of real-time AI products and how to protect your institution from fraud today.